Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm Alicia
I'm Janae.
and we are on conversations on health, happiness, and hope. And today you brought some great inspirational books. I'm looking forward to hearing about those.
Thank you. I am really excited about this episode. I love books, so um, I
Likewise.
yes, so of course. But yeah, I brought a few books that have been really impactful for me. So should we do them? I do one and you do one? Is that how we want to do it? Kind of like how we've done things before, or should I go through my whole list? Okay.
I like doing one and then the other,
Okay.
alternating. Yeah.
All right, no problem. So this is kind of a cheat because it's a three-book series and
Aw.
children's book, but they are really amazing. I read them to my preschoolers when I was a preschool teacher. This is what do you do with an idea? What do you do with a chance? See
Mm.
that?
Yeah, it's pretty.
And then what do you do with a problem?
Ooh.
And so they are children's books, but the
Mhm.
way Yamato writes these is so impactful that it really affected me because I was going through a time in my life where there was a lot of chaos and tumult, and I was, just going through a lot of heavy, heavy stuff.
Mhm.
And especially the one, what do you do with a chance? At the end of the book, and I hope I'm not ruining the story. It's still a beautiful story, even if I tell you the end. Um, it goes through this whole series about all these pages about different things you can do with a chance. And then it gets to the end and it says, so what do you do with the chance? You take it because it just might be the start of something incredible. So there's this
Wow.
idea, yeah, this idea that a chance can be something very vague. It doesn't matter what it is. But if there is something out there that is calling you to make a move, just do it. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the same thing, kind of the same thing with an idea. At the end of this one, I think he talks about you share your idea. And like you don't want to just keep it to yourself. Um,
Mhm.
but the idea is like an egg in the book, which is really, really great. And then in this one, what to do with the problem, he talks about, you know, when you're ignoring your problem, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then at the end, he says, well, you face it. It may turn out to
Yeah.
be smaller than you think. So even though these are children's books, I found them that even for adults, in a very simple and poetic way, it could speak to us and be an inspiration to kind of face our problems and move forward in life. And it's a great way to introduce these topics to your children or to your nieces, nephews, or younger people that you work with as well. So that is my first.
Absolutely, great lessons. So thanks for sharing that. When were you reading those to your preschool students?
So I want to say the last time I taught was in 2018.
Hmm.
So I think I discovered them maybe 2017, maybe 2016-ish.
Yeah.
And I would read them to the students, and they love the pictures. The illustrations are so um, graphic is not the word, but they're simple, but
Hmm.
they're very bold, and they kind of draw you in. And, it kind of has this, manga-esque kind of style to it, where it
Hmm.
just kind of pulls you into the story, and the pictures are just so interesting, and even though there's very little words. So
Yeah.
it was really a great way to read to children, to get them one interested in reading, but then also this idea that the pictures are explaining what these simple words are in a very broad and impactful way.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So
Might have to suggest those to some family members.
There's a new one he has too, and I'm going to order it, but I forgot what it's called, so I have to look it up. I'll put it in the chat afterwards.
Yeah, I appreciate
But
that
that's
with
on the same
the
series.
author's
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, as I was telling you before we went live, I was having a hard time figuring out which books to talk about because there's just so many good ones. I went back through them like, okay, these are the nonfiction ones that are obviously mainstream that a lot of people probably already know about. These are some that I read in childhood that have stuck with me, parts of them. And then it's also the, well, I don't remember everything that I read anymore type deal. So the first one that came to me was Christy Brown's My Left Foot.
Okay.
And they actually made a movie on this one. And this book, my librarian in high school, she helped me pick out this book because we had to do a book report. And she's like, well, what are you interested in, my dear? I was like, well, I like art and I like writing and I like reading, and very much like I do today. And she brought out this book, and right away I had kind of a connection to it because it was called My Left Foot, and I was born with 6 toes on my left foot. And I was like, wow, what are the odds? Because the librarian didn't know that.
Right.
And I start reading the book, and it is about this first a little boy who has cerebral palsy, and his family is urged by the doctors, because this happens, I don't recall when, maybe 1960s or so.
Okay.
And they urge him to kind of like hide him in the back room because he's not going to have a normal life. And his parents were just very loving and did not listen to the doctors, thankfully. And it's a little bit of a love story too, because as he gets older, he falls in love with his babysitter, which is pretty much the same age as him.
Yeah.
And he loves art. So he learns to paint with his left foot, and he paints pictures
Oh,
of
wow.
her. And it's beautiful. And he ends up like traveling to Paris by plane. And it's just a really inspirational stories. So whether you want to read it or you want to watch it, it's a book and it's also a movie. And I'm just so glad that my librarian in high school suggested that book to me because it became one of my favorites immediately.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Like, what really too, when you talked about that, now I definitely want to read that and watch the movie, is how his parents, even though the conventional wisdom at the time was to hide his child away, they wouldn't do it. Which is very touching to me because I think even that is even indicative of things that can still happen even now. You know, we have to listen to our hearts and you know, of course, you know, I love children and you know, it's very important to me that they feel validated and loved and that other people know that we validate and love them.
Yes, absolutely. What a wonderful way to say that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that book. I definitely have to read that. I might read that with my children. It would be a great like family read.
Yeah. I might have to go and watch the movie again since it's been a long time. I read it and then I watched the movie.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's always the best way to do it. I know. My son's like, I don't like it when we read the book and then watch the movie. It ruins the movie for me.
That's cute.
But it's probably better with nonfiction than it is with fiction.
Right.
To make a good movie and kind of stick to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not just making up things.
Yes. Oh. Okay, so my turn. So my other book is called Wild by Cheryl Strayed. And this was also a movie. And I want to say I might have seen it, but I don't know if I actually have seen it. It was one of those books, like one of those things like where you've read and visualized it so much, you're not sure if you actually saw it or you just think you saw it because it was so vivid in your mind. So so Wild is about a woman who's gone through a divorce and she had some addiction issues and some infidelity, which ended up on her part, which ended up ruining her marriage. And then her mother died and her father had already passed away. And so she was just in a very kind of dark place. And it's more descriptive in the book, but then she decides on a whim she is going to hike the PC from start to finish. So I think it starts somewhere in California and it ends in Washington State.
Wow.
So so it's this, I mean, it's huge trail, it's a famous trail. She spends a year preparing, like getting her backpack ready and all this stuff, and then she goes out on the trail, and it really is about her journey on that trail, the people she meets, her feelings, her emotions, her just everything that she was going through, and how she was able to work through all of those emotions and all of those kind of what do you want to call them? Just those hiccups in her life that she came to, and decisions that she had made. And she was even able at some point to kind of reconcile her emotions and her feelings about her mother dying. And it was just very beautiful the way the story is written. I mean, I wouldn't say it's for children. She does use some language. It's not an adult novel, but it's a novel made for adults.
Okay.
I'm explaining that correctly. But she's very honest in her storytelling. And of course, at the time, I had just gotten into solo hiking a lot. And so it was just all about the fact that here is this woman who had never really been hiking before. She'd been camping, but she'd never been hiking. And she decided she's just going to go out and do this hike. And she completes the hike. I mean, she does it. I mean, my hat's off to her. I always, it was my big inspiration to try and hike for us on the East Coast, it's the Appalachian Trail. So it's the AT. So that one would be, I would love to do that because it starts in Georgia and it ends in Maine.
Oh, wow.
So it's like the polar opposite on either coast. But I don't know, I love that book. It was very inspirational to me. I have it somewhere, but it's probably in a box still.
Yeah.
So I don't have that one. But yeah, so that one is a book and a movie. So those would be a good one to read too. It's kind of inspirational, girl power,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said it's called Wild?
It's called Wild. Yeah.
Wild. Okay.
Yeah. And I want to tell you why her name is Cheryl Strayed, but I can't tell you because she explains it in the book. It's great.
Okay. I'm guessing she strayed from her plant of some sort.
You're on the right track.
Yeah. That's really cool because it's like she's taking this hike and going over the physical obstacles while she's processing the emotional obstacles as well. So that sounds impactful.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing. So one that I have on my list is both like educational, informative, and funny and heartwarming. And it's a book that you wouldn't think you would get all of those things from. And it is Alex and Me by Dr. Irene Pepperberg.
Okay.
And she may still be a scientist who is studying communication and pathology. And she was trying to be taken seriously as a woman in the science field by working with her brilliant African gray parrots. And she was very good about not allowing like emotional connection. And so it's an experiment because already as a woman, she was more at risk because this was at a time where it just wasn't common for women to be in the field. So she just wanted to be taken seriously and have her work be of value. And this African gray parrot's name was Alex. And he quickly picked up on games like finding the key, knowing what the different colors were, shapes. And then they introduced another parrot along the way. And Alex has a personality of his own, and he starts picking on the parrot and trying to get him to like guess the wrong answers. He uses naughty language toward him, which I don't know where he learned that. And one day, Dr. Pepperberg leaves the office, and she wraps up her work, and she's like, she just goes, "Bye, Alex," and Alex goes, "Bye, I love you." And it's like, how did he learn that? And it was just so sweet. And yeah, it was a book that just surpassed my expectations, because like I said, you have like heartwarming love and humor and the wit and like the banter of the two birds and Dr. Pepperberg in her career. And it was just a really cool book that I always told people about who love animals and just love to learn about things like that. It made me think of, gosh, I can't think of her name right now, but with Coco the gorilla and all of the work she did. Yeah.
I know the name, and it's like I can see it, but I can't think of it.
Jane Thompson's coming to mind, but that could be totally wrong. I can picture her. Blonde ponytail.
Goodness, yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, animals have they really do have their own personality. Like the more you watch them and the more you're around them, you're like, oh yeah. It might be, we might compare it to like the way we see children with each other, but it's very sweet. Yeah. So I'll have to read that one. That sounds really good too.
I'm glad. Alex and Me. And I'm going to write down Wild by Cheryl Strayed.
Yeah. Oh, that is my next one. All right. So my next one I do have with me, and this one is Braiding Sweetgrass. I'll have to look at the name to pronounce it. Robin Wall Kimmerer. And this is an amazingly beautiful book. It is about nature and plants and the way plants grow and our relationship to plants and nature, told through the stories of indigenous peoples of North America. So what I really appreciated about this book is her knowledge and understanding of true sustainability and what that really means. And I really connected with her in her way of explaining it and teaching it. And, because sometimes we think everything that we hear is like, oh, this is bad and that practice is bad and we need to be all vegan and we need to not eat this and that. And the way she explains it, it really piqued my attention, because it's the way I really feel as well, is that it's not about one thing is wrong and the other thing is right. It's about the balance that we have. We tend to, as an industrial society, to overdo everything instead of having a balance. So she talks about the native peoples, and even like the earlier pioneer farmers, when they would go out and they would forage for things, they wouldn't take every single mushroom or every single plant. They would only take half, because the other half needed to stay and go to seed so that there would be plants for the next year. And then if they went out and they realized, well, there's really not that many this year, then they did without that year, or they did something else, because obviously that year was not a good year for harvesting that particular item. And she even talked about the cycles of the trees and how nut trees communicate with each other. I mean, it was just amazing. She's also a scientist. So he goes into the scientific names of everything and the meaning of those names and why those names are important. And then this part here, it's on page 177. She describes herself as, I am the woman with the basket, and how I fill it is a question that matters. And then she says, whether we are digging wild leeks or going to the mall, how we consume in a way, or how do we consume in a way that does justice to the lives that we take. So she considers everything that we take from nature as a gift from nature. And then we also need to give back. So, it's just a really beautiful book. And one of the things that I'm not sure if it's in this book, I think it's in this book, where she talks about the fact that when we go to the mall, one day the shopping mall actually impacts more animals and trees than going out and hunting for a deer and bringing it back home and eating it.
Wow.
Because of all of the trucks, the gasoline, the grasslands and trees they had to knock down to build that, all the animals that were displaced, and then all of the electricity and things that keeps that mall running, and then all of the systems around that mall, which further pushes out nature and kills nature and pollutes the waters. And I was like, I never even thought of it that way. So, and then she even goes into beekeeping and how, our modern day practice of keeping bees and moving them from one orchard to the next, that's what's really disturbing them, instead of letting them go swarm and then come back. So, I mean, it's just, her knowledge is really amazing. And I thought, wow, this is really a different way of looking at it, and looking at sustainability, and looking at what really is a eco-friendly way to live on an individual basis.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Really kind of devastating to think about the mall example, though.
I know. I was just like,
wow.
I want to go to the mall.
Right? So,
yeah.
Did this book inspire you to start like the homesteading life that you did, or did you read this once you already started it?
I had already started the homesteading lifestyle and someone else had told me about this book a while ago, and I just never got around to reading it. But they were like, "You've got to read this book. You would love it." And so I actually got the Audible book because I was listening to it while I was driving, and then I went and got the hard copy. I'm like, I've got it. I have to see this. I have to be able to read it and make notes and stuff. And I was like, okay, this really, really speaks to me. Now, where I separate a little bit from the author here is that she, at least from my impression of her work, still sees us as very much as a taker from nature. And I do believe that we are one and the same. We are nature. We are, when it comes down to it, we are an extension of nature. We are, we just talk. And, whereas nature does not purposely do things to harm herself, we do to ourselves and to other parts of nature. So when we harm ourselves, we are harming nature, because we are inherently a part of nature. We are natural beings. We are wild ourselves. We've just forgotten it. But I do love her idea that there is balance. You don't have to forswear ever going out and buying your heels or, whatever, or going out to dinner, but that there is a balance that can be struck, that kind of leads for a more honest and sustainable way of life.
Yeah. Wow. That is a special book. Thank you. And that was Braided
Sweetgrass.
Braided Sweetgrass. Thank you.
So, yeah, it's almost 400 pages, so it's a big book.
It looks like it.
Yeah, but it's great.
That is really interesting. I'm trying to get better with more like simplification of like my foods. I've always been a junk food junkie and love my sweets. So I'm trying. I'm starting to make like my own granola bars and my energy bars and yogurt bark. So that's on my list.
That's great.
Yeah.
I want to start making my own cereal
for that.
Yep. I want to start making my own cereal because I've stopped buying boxed cereals, and so I'm just watching all these different YouTube videos on how to make your own cereal and different ones. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. So tying in with nature and what you were saying, I am bringing up a strange book. I just noticed I have a spot on my glasses. A strange book that people either just in my AP literature class is like, oh, I hated that book. It was awful. It was just torture to read. And I was so intrigued by it. I thought it was just interesting and phenomenal and really helped me appreciate nature. And the book is by Annie Dillard, and it's Pilgrim on Tinker Creek.
Oh.
Now, it does have some graphic scenes that are kind of sad to watch. Like there's a deer that's struggling in the tree, and I'm trying to remember because this again, it's just one of those that I don't remember as well anymore. I think she was at like this cabin to like write a book, maybe. Mm-hmm. And her whole focus was to observe and not interfere. So kind of like how you're saying you're one with nature. Mm-hmm. So she would see like this spider get caught and like walk around with less legs, like it got caught under a chair or something. She watched this deer for an uncomfortably long time while it was in a trap and getting tired, and just like writing everything that she was seeing and observing. And like I said, some of those things are kind of graphic and sad, but mm-hmm. her imagery is just next level. Kind of like what you were saying with, I think it was Wild.
Yeah.
So you can just see everything so clearly that she's describing. And after I read that book, I saw a moth in the bathroom at our house, and it was like in the light, and it was just hanging out there for a while, and it was buzz, 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 and it was like out of the light, in the light type deal, the shade. And I ended up writing a poem about that moth because I was inspired by that book, and I was just kept observing it every time I was going into the bathroom. So yeah, that's just one of those strange books where if you bring it up, people might cringe and shudder and think it was so slow and there was nothing happening. And I was just like, well, her descriptions and her writing was just so beautiful and so vivid. So I had an appreciation for that a lot of people did not.
Right. Oh, it sounds really cool. Yeah. I can imagine how some people would find that to be disturbing, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm always kind of like one that's, how do you watch something and not put yourself in there and get involved? But at the same time, things happen all day long that we're not there to either stop or help or, in nature. And I'll be interested to find out what actually happens to the deer before I make any conclusions.
Yeah.
So I wrote that down. I definitely want to get that. I'm going to be on a book shopping spree after this.
Exactly.
So, let's see. So my last one I don't have with me. I don't think so. It is a fantasy, like science fiction fantasy novel series I read when I was in middle school. And the overall book is called The Deathgate Cycle series. And then it was book 4 of that series. So basically, the Deathgate Cycle is about the world after apocalypse, and the world has been sondered into 4 different places. And so the Earth is split into 4. There's one that's basically air, like, there's like island cities and things like floating island cities. And then another one is all water. The whole thing is water, and people live like in these air bubbles of land. And then another one is like volcano. And then I can't remember what the other one was. Oh, forest. Like the whole Earth is a forest. And so as I'm talking to you, I'm realizing where my love of nature started coming from. Like all these books that I used to read, especially I love fantasy. And I love Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, and Narnia, and Wheel of Time, all of those books. But this particular series, in book 4, they introduce a character that has dark skin. And not just like when you're reading these books, oh, her skin was sun darkened. So that was still just a Caucasian person that just was tan. But this was actually a Black person in the book. And it was the very first time I had ever read a character in a book that was female of dark skin coloring that was possibly a love interest of the main character who was white. And it was, I don't know, it just stuck out to me. I remember that. And not that there weren't other books that had it probably, but it was the first one I had ever read, especially of the authors that I liked to read. So it was, I guess you can say it was inspiring to me because I like white men. So I was like, oh, this is great, because I mean, not that it doesn't bother me reading a book with all white cast or watching a movie with all white cast. I just put myself into the character's place that I like, or, whatever. It doesn't bother me at all, but it is always really nice when that feature is added in, even if it's intentional in some places, but as a new character, not replacing an old character and changing it, but as a new, unique individual character with their own feelings and emotions and backstory. And so it led me to look for more books that had that kind of inclusive world building, because it's very interesting in fantasy novels because it's all about world building, right? How do you not have people of different colors in your books? And you're building this giant world of different species and planets and, ideologies. So I was really appreciative of that. So that was written by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. They have written many, many books, and you may know them as the authors and creators of Dungeons & Dragons.
Of Dungeons & Dragons? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, how cool. I love the movie.
Yeah. So they were, they're the original authors and creators of that. So, yeah. So that was my last one. I mean, I could go on, but.
Right. Well, that's so special. So did you relate to that character in other ways then?
In some ways, she had very strict parents. And, and of course, this was in the novel itself. Things did not work out because he was much older and he just saw her as a child. And she was like 16 going on 17. And in her world, she was a woman. But to him, he was like, you're a kid. This is, this is not happening. But she was very brave. And I remember that about her. I haven't read this book in a long time. She was very brave, and she was willing to kind of put herself out there to help others, even though it put her in harm's way. And I just remember thinking that was just such a great, just her character in general was really great, because she could have been bitter and closed off, because, sometimes when you grow up feeling like you're always confined, you tend to isolate yourself from other people because you don't want to, you don't want other people to have that kind of influence over you either. But she chose the opposite, just to put herself out there in the world and to help people, which was really, I thought was a really good character arc for her. Just a good story for people in general, not like I had no sense of course I was in middle school. I had no sense of like, this is how you should be if you're a girl. But it was just as a person, just, if you have the ability to, whatever you can do what you can to help people.
Yeah. And you definitely do that.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thanks for sharing. That is awesome. And, I'm in a community development class now, so we definitely talk about different privileges and barriers and areas of lack. And when you were talking about, you know, an all white cast, it was making me think of ageism in like movies and how they're usually, you know, a kid's movie, or it's focusing on a group of 20 somethings or 30 somethings. And then someone who's older, they usually just play like the role of a parent or a grandparent. So yeah, it's interesting the way media and even, you know, arts such as literature tends to narrow the focus sometimes.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll have more and more that is adding the inclusivity and making it more diverse and more open and friendly, and you know, just allowing to explore more.
Yeah, because that's how we are in life. We don't go through life just hanging out with people our age.
Right.
I mean, we interact all day long with people of different age groups. And I mean, really, the only time you see that is in the school system, which is very not indicative of how real life is. But I mean, in your family system, there's people of different ages within your family system. So,
yeah.
And you have to get along with, I mean, you don't have to, but it would be nice if you got along with everybody and learned how to interact with them.
Makes it easier.
Yeah. So, do you have another one?
I do. I was going back and forth between a couple. Again, it's one that I don't fully remember as much, but I just remember just feeling so much like awe for the person and their life. And I just felt really good when I read it. And the funny thing is, this is the first author in real life that I knew, Eileen Button. She was my public speaking, I think that's what it was called, professor at community college. And I got to the class and people were just talking about how awesome this instructor is. Like, she gives speeches and she wrote a book and she was on ABC 12 News. And I was like, what? Am I the only one that doesn't know this? So it was like in the free time, like before class or after class, people were coming up to her and are asking her about her book and asking about the column. And I'm like, okay, I need to know more about this person. She seems amazing. So I read her book, which is called The Waiting Place, and it's just beautiful. And if I'm remembering correctly, she is the wife of a pastor, which is very different to me because I just wasn't raised in a very religious household, but always had that appreciation. And she had children where one was very ill. And I remember in the chapter, that child was going through surgery, and you're just like hoping and praying with the mother who wrote the book, you know, that the child's going to be okay. And I was friends with her on Facebook after I graduated, and I was like, hey, I finally got around to reading your book, and oh my gosh, this chapter just took my breath away. And she sent me a picture of her son, who's, you know, now much older. I think he was in high school at the time. It's like, yep, he's here, he's healthy and well, and he's just watching TV with me. And it was just such a special feeling. But I want to say the book was all about those moments where you're like waiting to get on the other side, like when you don't know what's happening. And then it goes into like her career and more of her family and her aspirations. And yeah, it was just beautifully written, and it had a lot of heart to it. So that's Eileen Button's The Waiting Place.
That's The Waiting Place. I like that. Yep.
Welcome.
Aptly titled.
Yes, very much so.
And then are you also going to put in the chat your books as well?
Okay. Yeah, perfect. I think that would be a good way to do it, and then everyone can see. And the other one I was going to mention was Marilyn Wrigley's Stage for Success. That was one I was going back and forth on, which of course you know that one. Yep, that's one that I have up here too. Something that was different for me was I had finally started reading like novels and things again, where I was basically nonfiction for like 3 or 4 years when I was just, healing and finding myself again. And I read her book, and I got the same feelings of like that hope and inspiration from reading her novel, because it just has those things like, the main character is fulfilling a dream, and at first she's like an outsider to this new place, and there's a love interest, and there's just so much passion, and creating these new spaces as this interior designer. And it was just something that Marilyn did a really nice job with. And I felt like, wow, I had no idea I could feel this way reading, a fiction book.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really special. So I had to sneak that one in there too. At first I had that one right after The Waiting Place, and then I put Alex and Me in there because I knew that one was it's funny and interesting and something that people hadn't really heard of, probably.
That's powerful. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love fiction, but for the same reason, for a very long time, I was not reading fiction. I've just started getting back into reading fiction, and I am, as I'm looking for books to read, I am definitely looking for, like you were talking about, it's either focus on one, like all the younger people, and then the older people are kind of relegated to side roles. Well, I'm looking for books that are, the main character is older, in like a different stage of life, just because I want that perspective. Someone sent to me a meme that was like, all these stories about these teenage superheroes. Send me a story about a single mom in her 40s who went through hell and is still out there fighting the bad guy. That's the story I want to read. And I'm like, me too.
Yeah.
Or just, or just, it doesn't even have to be, a single mom, but just a person who is just not necessarily at that stage where they don't really have any other heavy weights yet. I mean, everybody's story is different. I mean, I know there are children at a young age who are dealing with some really bad situations. But to get a story from a person who's kind of had some years and some experience behind them, who's kind of seen the consequences of choices that they've made throughout their life, and then from that knowledge can move forward with some decision making, that is very intriguing to me, to see how an author makes that story work.
Yeah, agreed. It has that the grit to it.
Yes. Yep. That's it. That's the word, the grit.
Well, this was an awesome discussion. So thank you so much for this idea.
Thank you. No, it was great. I loved it. I could talk books all day long.
Well, that's originally what I thought about doing when we were discussing possibly having a podcast. I was like, we can talk about like books and art and music. So yeah, I like that we did this. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Just as I'm glancing at my bookshelf, if you've never read Ender's Game, read it. And if you've seen the movie is not even the cliff notes of what happened in the book. So, Orson Scott Card is an amazing writer. And if you've never read that book, read the book. It's very, very, very good.
The Ender's Game. I feel like that might be one that Chris read in college. But when you said it, for whatever reason, The Giver came to mind.
Okay.
But that name sounds familiar, Ender's Game. So I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Giver's another good one.
It is. It really is. That's one that Chris showed me. I didn't read The Giver. I watched the movie. And,
Same.
Well, thank you so much, Janae. I look forward to this again, and hopefully, a lot of people will get in the spirit of reading. Something that this just made me think of is that quote that says, "Every person just lives one life, but a reader lives 1,000."
Yes.
And it's very true. So, thanks everyone for watching. Stay inspired.
And do something that makes you stronger every day. Bye.
Bye. So great to talk with you.
Yes, same here.
Thanks.
Bye.